The Philadelphia Eagles' young defenders shined in their preseason opening win against the Baltimore Ravens on Friday. Stock up, stock down coming your way on this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, this Monday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by my co-host Gino Camilleri. We're brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. The Eagles got their first preseason win of 2024, 16-13 in Baltimore on Friday night. Patrick Johnson with the game-winning strip sack with 10 seconds to go. Jake Elliott gets redemption, I should say, after two missed kicks, a missed field goal attempt and a missed PAT on Friday. And Gino, overall, there's a lot of ups, a lot of downs from that first game, but I think the main takeaway was the young defensive players, first and second year guys. Most players that really stood out, even on offense, were the highest vet was a 3-year player, which was a really good sign.
It's one of those anticipatory positions where we were saying, what is it going to be like when they actually go against a different unit? Because we had heard the reports that Kelee Ringo looked better and Isaiah Rodgers was getting a lot of those first team reps. Quinyon Mitchell was battling out with the top wide receivers. And what did those guys do the other night against Baltimore? Was it against the ones? Obviously no. But I thought all of them showed flashes of brilliance at time, and especially Kelee Ringo, because one of the things with Kelee was that he kind of fell a little bit because of those developmental concerns, right? Can he become a tackler? Can he turn his head and find the football? Well, man, you talk about turning his head to find the football. Outside of that first rep where he kind of got turned around a little bit, balls in his blind spot, every time he was around the football, he was making a play. Heck, he saves a touchdown at one point in that football game. And I think Vic Fangio even said it in his press conference that he did a really good job of getting to the ball. And Darius Slay, he threw a little jab at them saying that those young guys left a little money on the field, not picking it off. But man, Quinyon Mitchell showed some football intelligence plays where he's just hanging in the hip pocket of the defender, and right as the ball's coming to the wide receiver, he undercuts it, almost intercepts it there. Even Isaiah Rodgers, man, for not playing in as long as he did, he didn't look out of place at all. I mean, there were some rough spots for sure, but man, I thought he held up brilliantly, and you could just go down the list of all these young DBs.
I totally agree. Ringo showed he has a niche that, not to say Quinyon Mitchell can't be physical or press at the line of scrimmage, same with Isaiah Rodgers, but that length, that physicality, Ringo's the bigger corner. I really like that role, especially when you have ball hawks like Quinyon Mitchell, who showed that off. I nearly yelped when I saw him jump that ball. Perfect position, got in the receiver's hip pocket, and then the vision, the Toledo ball hawk instincts took over. Got to finish that play, but that was perfect position. And that was why you drafted Quinyon Mitchell in the first round, to make plays like that. But I like the idea of Kelee Ringo on the boundary, where it's really coming along, Gino, where the body position was there. Last year, it felt like he struggled at times to track the ball in the air. The tackling was a problem in the preseason. I thought he was very physical, made some good wrap-ups on Friday night. I thought Ringo and Mitchell were really impressive. And Isaiah Rodgers is having a great summer, but I think those two got a leg up on him. He's still in the lead for that outside job probably, but Ringo and Mitchell had a night. I mean, Quinyon, he even had a QB pressure on a slot blitz. I was having a lot of fun watching those two.
It was cool to see the ingenuity with Vic Fangio and just some slivers that he's going to throw in.
A lot of them.
And that's what a cover 6 defense, when utilized to its fullest extent, can give you. It can give you that optionality, and especially having players like Quinyon Mitchell, where you've been kind of against the idea of playing him in that slot position. Well, hey, add in the blitzing element to his game, Lou. Add in the ability.
He's playing so well in there that there's no way Fangio's moving him out. It's
tough to move him out, man. And he kind of said in his press conference that it was kind of his position out of necessity.
Right.
Kind of sounds like nobody else has stepped up in that
to get
regard.
The best players out there, which I do agree with that. I think the combo of Rodgers / Ringo, Mitchell inside, and then Slay on the outside is probably your best combination right now. And I think Mitchell going into the slot and doing what he's doing, Gino, is a great sign for this pick, for this development, that this kid who has never done this before in a brand new, complicated defense can wear so many hats already. I think he's going to have no problem going back to the boundary, which is his natural position. So this is just more seasoning, more versatility, that just more weapons in his arsenal that he can utilize. And that's going to be huge, like when you mentioned on the show a few weeks ago, when he starts to shadow receivers, that he can play on the inside. But I still, again, long-term, at some point, even in 2024, want him on the outside. The good news is when they were only using 2 corners, like when they were in their base defense, Ringo was actually the one coming off the field, and Mitchell moved to the outside with Rodgers on the other side. So that was noteworthy.
If you're talking in a stock term, buy futures on this Philadelphia Eagles secondary before they get hot, because this is the first time in Lou, how long? I mean, the Rasul and Sydney years, it was like, oh, if we can get there, but they never really showed it in Philly. These guys have already showed flashes for you. I mean, Kelee Ringo came on at a portion for you last year and was arguably your best defensive back when Darius Slay was out of the game. Throw in Quinyon Mitchell in there, and we're only going to see Cooper DeJean come back. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's going to come back from his injury. Sidney Brown's going to come back from his injury. This unit is only going to continue to get better and better. So buy those futures now before that stock gets way too high.
There was even a play where Quinyon's in the slot and he recognized the route that Ringo's guy was running, and he almost redirected Ringo's receiver and then got back to his guy. So I thought Mitchell made a bunch of plays, Gino, where
let me ask you this, because I'm sure our fans noticed this as well. Did the communication seem a bit better already than it did in the secondary last year?
And 3rd and goal. I was watching the All-22 today, and you see Avonte Maddox point out the route of the running back for the one defender.
You saw a ton
he points out the
communication
crosser
the
for the other receiver. I thought Avonte Maddox saw the field really well. It definitely looked like they were communicating, and it's why they were able to force multiple field goals when the Ravens got in their own territory on Friday. So I completely agree with that. They definitely looked in sync. There were some guys that didn't. Like, I thought Zack Baun was all over the place, but most of them, and we'll get into stock down, but most of them looked really good.
And I think it starts with the guys that were calling the plays and some of those linebackers, man, and especially Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Oh, my gosh, dude. Trotter, and even to Kobe Dean, they had a great night.
They got the best bump so far from Vic Fangio, in my opinion. Fangio understands that you can use these linebackers in multiple different fashions, right? Seeing Nakobe Dean line up as the Mike, then go down to the front and pretend like he's just changing the front call, and he goes in on a blitz, and then all of a sudden you have the other inside linebacker who, Nakobe Dean, he's right there going after the quarterback. Then you got somebody behind him to fill in his position, and boom, they made magic happen, dude. And I think Devin White, look over your shoulder. Zack Baun, look over your shoulder right now, because Nakobe Dean and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., they worked very well in unison, especially on that play right there, man. It was, you could identify that they played well off of each other, and they understood how to call out this defense, how to set up the front, how to get everybody aligned. Were there communication issues? At times, but if you look back to week 1, week 2, week 3 of that team last year, where they were putting in a lot of young players in that rotation, there were communication errors all over the field, blown assignments left and right. And you're talking week 1 of the preseason, that's expected. They went out there and played much better than expected, and it starts with the green dots, man. It starts with those guys.
Trotter had 5 tackles on the night. He had a sack, 2 third-down stops, even made a really nice play in punt coverage, getting a tackle on the returner for no gain. He looked like his dad. I mean, that's obviously dramatic, but he looks like he's been doing it for 10-plus years. And what's really interesting, I saw this on Twitter, and I thought of this too. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. got a sack on Josh Johnson. Jeremiah Trotter, his dad, senior, the last time he played in 2009 when he came back to the Eagles, one of his last starts ever was against Josh Johnson and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is a total full circle moment. But I think before you know it, Trotter is going to end up being one of the 2 starters at some point this year, sooner rather than later. And I like what Nakobe Dean did. He made a really nice pass breakup off a big hit, got a quarterback hit. Like, he looked good too. but Trotter won the day. I mean, for sure at that position.
I thought the young backers in all, look at Jalyx Hunt, look at Nolan Smith.
Oh,
I
dude,
thought
Jalyx
those guys
Hunt looked great.
showed their explosiveness at a level that we really haven't seen in that middle seven, right? You bring in Shaq Davis last year, man, and he's just a shell of himself. And then all of a sudden you're looking at Nakobe Dean coming downhill and just bursting through
or
the
Jalyx
A-gap.
Hunt 6'3", over 200 pounds, and yet
And just
moving
moving
that well in
fluidly
space.
in
You could tell he was a
open
safety.
field. Yeah,
you could
and
tell he was a safety.
Nolan Smith, there was one rep that I believe it was Honest NFL who does
just saw
probably
it,
the
yeah.
best job. If you want to learn about Vic Fangio defense, go follow him on Twitter. He's the best at breaking it down. But there's one play where Nolan Smith he's lined up just over the slot wide receiver, and behind him there's an overhang. So if you understand the basics of a quarters defense, usually when there's a guy lined up directly behind a player, it can indicate a blitz. And what did they do? They blitzed Nolan Smith from depth. And that wasn't even the near hash, Lou, where you kind of have that bonus of taking a little bit of the field and reducing it. That was from the far hash. He goes and he hits a nasty ghost rush where he looks like he's about to long arm the tackle, dips under, and he gets home to the quarterback. Those are the little things that having explosive hybrid type of players in a Vic Fangio defense, when you mesh scheme, when you mesh talent, those are the little things that get us excited. Now it's the first preseason game. We can't get in over our head, but those flashes, those are the little things that you can kind of piece together and say, this is how we are going to win football games.
And it's what you heard at camp all month was this
Bingo.
about Jalyx Hunt, this about all these players, and then we got to see it on the field translate. So this isn't just really a one-off.
And we were underrating him too. We didn't think he was going to be able to see the field right away.
Was going to be a redshirt player, and after seeing some of the hits he made on special teams, the way he was rushing the passer, had a couple nice wins. They did a nice stunt where he blitzed through the A-gap, got the pressure, made some nice coverage plays in space. Jalyx Hunt might play a lot, actually, this year. I think
he's going to dress a lot. 46 man every single week.
I think all three overhang players played really well. Patrick Johnson, too, probably going to end up making this roster. The game-winning strip sack with like 10 seconds to go, made a couple nice stops in the red zone, on the goal line. He's such an instrumental piece of this special teams unit that I know we haven't really had him on our 53-man roster projections, but you got to look at the overhang as a separate position than just edge, because these three guys are going to do so many different things compared to Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff and Brandon Graham that they probably want a third guy like Nolan Smith and like Jalyx Hunt.
So you can keep Josh Sweat, keep Brandon Graham, keep Bryce Huff.
And maybe that's Zack Baun, but they're using him inside. So I think it's probably Patrick Johnson.
If you wanted to move Baun there, I think it would be the better place to play him than inside linebacker, and we will talk about that. But Patrick Johnson is so underappreciated, and it probably goes to having that injury last year. But there were moments where if you turn on the Super Bowl tape, he's lined up on defense. He wasn't just a special teams player. He was playing meaningful minutes for this team in big moments. If he doesn't get rostered by the Eagles, Lou, somebody's claiming him off of waivers immediately.
I totally agree. There are a lot of positives about this game. We're going to keep with stock up in segment 2, stock down in segment 3. It's a Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
As we roll along, this episode of LOE is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. My draft's coming up next week. Been listening a lot. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Stock up, stock down after the Eagles 16-13 preseason week 1 victory in Baltimore over the Ravens. I mean, so many guys for stock up. Quinyon Mitchell, Kelee Ringo, Jeremiah Trotter, Nakobe Dean, Nolan Smith, Jalyx Hunt. Gino, I'd say on offense, there weren't as many stock ups, but I do want to give a shout out to Tyler Steen. I thought there were people, and I was surprised at a lot of tweets talking about how he wasn't playing well. And there were a couple brutal pass protection reps, but the guy has a bum leg right now. He cannot anchor. And to watch him battle and some of the run blocking reps he put out there, and there was one pass rep that I put on Twitter where he recognizes, he stops his guy, passes him over basically to the right tackle, notices the linebacker blitzing across, not only recognizes it, but has a chance, makes the athletic play on one leg basically to get over and make that block too. I thought Tyler Steen was better than Mekhi Becton on Friday night.
I think the biggest winner is the Eagles' offensive line as a whole, because you now have
Trevor Keegan too. Keegan looked really good.
You have 6 guys that are instant starters. Your depth is crazy deep, like you said. Trevor Keegan could potentially be the future right guard for this team. He's a mauler at that side. Didn't allow a single pressure in pass protection. You talk about Darian Kennard, who, when we did our 53-man preview, he was on the outside looking in. He played every single snap for this team at right tackle. You look at Matt Hennessy, Sharpie, Nick Gates, even these guys that are your 3rd and 4th string players, they were able to put out a meaningful offensive line to allow the quarterbacks to operate and the running backs to. You look at Kendall Milton was running with miles of space and huge gaps, and that's the 4th string offensive line you're playing with. That's impressive by Jeff Stoutland and that whole unit.
Dylan McMahon even, I thought, showed off his athleticism getting to the second level in some of those run plays. He's definitely undersized for an offensive lineman, even for a center, but
all right, at center, baby.
Yeah, he's got that elite raw athletic score, so he definitely showed that off on Friday night. I think also Gino stock up to Will Shipley, and of course he showed off the natural hands with that receiving touchdown. We know that's going to be his bread and butter in Kellen Moore's offense, but he sounded like from camp he was struggling in pass pro. He had a couple really nice protection reps for Kenny Pickett where he came in at the last second to kind of save Pickett from a sack, chopped the linebacker's legs out from underneath him, made a really nice block on a 3rd down play, made a nice tackle on special teams, got the return from the end zone to the 35-yard line with the new rule. I was really impressed with Will Shipley. I know the stats don't look impressive. He only averaged, 3.3 yards a carry, but everything else he did in Kellen Moore's offense and on special teams, this is going to be a player for sure. And I think they're going to use him a lot more than Kenneth Gainwell before you know it.
Take out the yards per carry, because if you add in his ability to be a receiving threat, I mean, look at the touchdown. Where did that come? That didn't come in the ground game, right? But get him out of number 39. He's going to be much more meaningful than anybody who's ever worn.
Yeah, the number 39 is definitely
Philly.
Not there. Yeah, we got to change that.
It's gross, but you just see the ease of hands and just how he operates in the open field. He's not stumbling over his own feet trying to locate the ball. It's just everything is smooth with him, and I think they're going to have a very good complement of backs back there to when you see Kellen Moore really game planning. How many times are you going to see Saquon back there with either Will Shipley or Kenneth Gainwell? And we've talked about this where one or multiple of these guys is motioning around the formation.
You're going to see a lot of 2021 personnel.
Yep, multiple backs, and Will Shipley,
how bad the tight ends look.
We mentioned this last year. Does Kenny Gainwell get some reps in the slot? Well, now if you don't have anybody to be wide receiver 3, like we're going to talk about,
yeah,
you might have to, out of necessity, that Will Shipley and Saquon and Kenny G and a rejuvenated Grant Calcaterra, who looked pretty good the other day in his snaps. How are those guys going to continue to benefit the pass game? But all in all, man, Will Shipley, I think at minimum, you're going to have a very high floor player who's going to be a special teams contributor for you for years. He's going to be somebody that can be a 3rd down switch up back for you. And between him and Kenny G, can they burden a number 1 running back if Saquon is out for any period of time? Hopefully that's to be determined, but I think with the meshing of their skill sets, you might have something there.
We got to go back to defense real quick too. Stock up to Marlon Tuipulotu. Gino, I thought he was their best defensive lineman on Friday, not just as a run stopper, but as a pass rusher too. He got to the quarterback multiple times.
We talk about how important that role behind Jordan Davis is going to be, and especially if Jordan Davis doesn't hit that peak, can there be another guy to fill in that's primarily that two-gap player that takes on two bodies, that is double the majority of the time. Marlon Tuipulotu, man, those Tuipulotu brothers, his brother over for the Chargers, they got some viciousness in their game, man. He's got some power in his paws. He can move guys off the spot, and he doesn't get moved very easily, Lou. When he anchors in, he's a tough son of a gun to get out of the way. He looked very polished the other day, and especially somebody who's been on and off the field, hasn't really seen too much consistency when it comes to just being healthy. I thought he looked pretty darn good overall, and I think him and Moro Jomo and even like a young Gabe Hall, a lot of these interior guys in that rotation, I thought they all played pretty darn good, if we're being honest.
No, I completely agree. I thought overall, again, there were some bright spots on offense. The young offensive linemen, especially on the interior, you can say Darian Kennard as well at right tackle, Will Shipley. I think Britton Covey was like the only real good receiver on Friday night.
Calcaterra showed some flashes.
Calcaterra was good too. Covey's punt return was awesome. The dude broke like 1,000 tackles and nearly took it to the house, which was really impressive. But overall, I think the defense really won the night on Friday. Who struggled in this game? We're going to get into stock down coming up next as we wrap up this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and to bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. All eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, time for stock down after the Eagles' 16-13 win on Friday over Baltimore. A lot of positives for sure, but I think there definitely were some players that struggled, and I think just like overall as a unit, we mentioned Britton Covey was solid, Grant Calcaterra, but stock down to the pass catchers, the amount of drops, the lack of separation. The Eagles, if they lose A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith, heck, even if Dallas Goedert or Saquon Barkley goes down and one of these other pass catchers, you could say at receiver or at tight end, have to step up. I'm a little nervous right now. I think if Howie Roseman's going to make one more move before the season, he's going to end up trading one of these defensive backs in a loaded secondary for some sort of pass catcher because it did not look good against Baltimore.
Outside of Covey,
that was it.
You can make the case that like Jacob Harris was your second best wide receiver.
I mean, Ainias Smith might get cut at this point. He looked in the fumble on the punt return. It's not good.
Joseph Nada, I thought there were some reps where it's like he just didn't finish towards the football, and even though he was covered, wasn't making plays towards it. Johnny Wilson, he's going to take some time to figure out the whole separation.
Had some good blocking reps, but he just was not separating.
Yeah, we know you got to catch the football in this league, man, to be a third wide receiver. And Paris Campbell, he better come back from that injury, and he better look good when he comes back from that groin injury.
Suddenly a sneaky important player for this offense after watching that game.
I'm kind of looking now at like the whole Olamide Zaccheaus move. Like, would it have been nice to keep him even with a Paris Campbell?
Maybe looking back now, yeah.
Would he have broke the bank? Probably not. But I think you're right. If you're going to look at a unit that needs some sort of breath of fresh air, it's all the wide receivers behind A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. One of the things you and I mention all the time is why you need so many defensive backs is because there's so many teams that have 3-4 wide receivers. I mean, Green Bay has legitimately 5 guys that they could go 5 wide, and I don't think any team is going to be able to cover that. So if you go down, teams are going to be able to lock on one guy, i.e. the playoff game last year where A.J. Brown is not in the game.
Or the Giants game where neither were playing. Look at what a disaster that was. Like, yes, obviously you're not going to have Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, and then another elite pass catcher most of the time. But the floor's got to be higher than what it is right now, right? I mean,
you have to have somebody that can at least play X and separate at least a quarter of the time, right?
The Eagles have gotten really lucky that Smith and Brown have stayed as healthy as they have over the last 2 years, right? And last year at the end of the season, we got a glimpse of what reality could be like if you don't get that kind of luck. If you go back to 2019 where your receivers were just not healthy, right? I mean, that can happen. And so these guys might have to step up. And I don't know right now if any of them are capable. And you mentioned Paris Campbell. I think he's the best of these guys. And again, this is early. It's only one preseason game. There's a lot of time still. But Paris Campbell, even the most proven player in this group, he can't stay healthy.
Brayton Covey, I've been pounding the table for him, man. Like, he might be.
Can he be your like Khalil Shakir this year?
He might be the most important player outside of Paris Campbell at the pass.
How bad is Hunter Renfrow that the Eagles have not signed him? What is it
for a while, man? There's a lot of veteran guys that'll probably get signed on as teams get another game of film on these guys. Like, it's just one preseason game. We can't. The world isn't ending, right? But it wasn't great to see your second and third quarterbacks not throw to guys that could catch the ball. Like, that's tough. I mean, Kenny Pickett, say what you will about his average depth of target and his unwillingness to throw the ball down the field, but there were times when Tanner McKee was willing to throw the ball down the field and the guys couldn't make plays on the football. And you need guys to make plays, and you need guys to do the little things well. Like, you talk about blocking. Hey, that's one trait, but in this world, this isn't a Chip Kelly team where blocking is more important. We're going to go. You got to be able to motion. You got to be a smart player to sit in space. You got to be able to win those one-on-ones. The Eagles got to find one of those guys soon enough. But there are plenty of teams around the league that do have a lot of depth at this position. And I'm thinking of like Buffalo, like with an Andy Isabella, like could we move one of our defensive backs for somebody like that? Or the idea of a Robert Woods has been thrown around.
John Mechie, maybe. Yeah, I would call up Houston. Like, hey, I know you just re-signed Noah Brown, but would you be willing to
they got a ton of guys to where you got to go get one of them in the building.
Houston is the team I'd call up. And even like, I don't know at this point, man, like I mentioned it to you on our Bleacher Report show, heck, is Sky Moore available for a low-end pick? There's got to be somebody else.
Yeah, like what's the variance between the guys you have on the roster and like the fifth or sixth guy in most of these other teams?
What would the Colts give up? And I know Downs just got hurt, but like Alec Pierce, is Alec Pierce available? They got to call somebody up. And the good news is, Gino, James Bradbury looked like he was holding his own at safety. That raises his trade stock. Maybe you can flip a Bradbury or a Josh Jobe, a Zach McPherson had a couple nice plays on special teams on Friday. Maybe you can flip one or two of those guys, or heck, an Eli Ricks for a receiver or a tight end, but they got to do something for sure. So I'd say stock down to the pass catchers. But you mentioned Kenny Pickett. He was really bad on Friday. He averaged, I think he only had 2 attempts that went for farther than 10 air yards, and one was a very poor underthrown deep ball to John Ross. I didn't like the trade at the time for Kenny Pickett. I thought Tanner McKee looked better on Friday. I'm still sticking with him being the better QB2 option, and I felt like that was confirmed on Friday. That was some Sam Bradford level football, and I just hate watching that kind of football.
He failed the Camilleri benchmark, and what I mean by that is I'm 5'8", and if you can't get your average depth of target past 5.8 yards on the football field, I don't want you to be the quarterback of my football team. And it was exactly what Kenny Pickett was, and I think we just kind of saw that. That's why I would like to see Tanner get the ability to play with the twos. I think that would be a nice little uptick for him. Maybe one of those guys could catch the football. But all in all, Kenny Pickett, just going back to the whole pick swap, and was there not a better option than this guy? Come on. I mean, I think we're all over it in the state of Pennsylvania. He's not going to be a fan of any team in the state of Pennsylvania outside of the building where he played college, which was the team that just shipped him off. So I don't know how much they love him there.
All right, Gino, before we wrap up the show, stock down to Joe Douglas and the New York Jets. Hassan Reddick, before he even shows up to practice, plays a down for the New York Jets, has requested a trade. The Eagles got a 3rd-round pick for this guy, a conditional pick that could turn into a 2. I don't know if that's going to happen because he has to hit a certain snap count with the Jets. I don't know if he's ever going to play for the Jets. How? I've never seen this in sports, or at least in my football lifetime, where a star player gets traded for a very obvious reason, and the whole league knows it, and a team trades for him, and then this guy requests a trade a few months later. Like, they totally botched this. And the weirdest part is Joe Douglas, of all people, knows Howie Roseman. How does he not understand what the situation was? Like, this is such an unreal just mess up from New York.
If anybody comes in and says, oh, Howie did like one of his tricks, like absolutely
no, there's no
not.
trick. The Eagles knew Hassan Reddick would not play on his current
And do you
contract.
think he didn't tell
there
Joe
was-
Douglas
yes.
that?
And he would not sign a second tier contract, which is what they were willing to give him. He was only going to play on a top tier deal. Everybody, including me and you, knew it. And I would just say, I wanted them to give it to him. They didn't do it. The Jets trade for him. How were you not willing to give up that pick? Do you think that Reddick was going to play on that deal for you and not Philadelphia, a team that he has no allegiance to, that's first move with you is a sign of disrespect by saying, we're just going to milk this contract, a 1-year rental, and not give you that deal? Like, what are you talking about?
Especially, and I know I've been critical of the Giants, but hey, you saw a guy come into the same building as you. You're playing in the same stadium as Brian Burns, and he walked in and he had a contract before he even stepped foot on the field.
Because when you make this trade, you should understand that they need a new deal, or else there's no, like, if the Eagles would have traded for AJ Brown and never gave him a contract, that would not have been good. That would not have been smart.
No, that's such a negligent move by Joe Douglas.
Crazy.
One, to not have had that contract in his hands and known what he wanted to get paid, because Howie Roseman isn't going to screw over one of his great friends in the National Football League. He's not going to try and underhand him and say, here's the guy, and I know he's never going to play for you. He told Joe, hey, the guy wants one of the highest deals in the NFL. You know what Reddick's camp did when they were looking for teams? They were calling around and saying, hey, we want one of the highest deals in the NFL. So you, being the Jets, to take that and not give him the deal, it's like everybody saw the elephant in the room, but you had your head down and you walked right under the elephant's legs and had no idea what you were doing.
And good for Hassan. Like, I'm glad he's saying, no,
pay
I'm
elite
not
football
going to.
players like Cry Me a River, Joe Douglas.
He's been a top 5 pass rusher over the last 3 years, and he's not going to just take the NFL taking advantage of him. And I totally respect that. I feel kind of bad for him. I don't know if he's going to get the deal he's seeking, but props to him for going for it and not just taking the crap of some new team that's trying to take advantage of him. So maybe the Eagles could trade for him. Maybe he'll take a mid-tier deal now with us.
The funniest thing ever, Howie
Can you imagine?
Roseman, if he did that, man. But all in all, I think it's just another cherry on top of the Howie Roseman is better than your general manager case number, 3,427,000.
Just another instance, another example where I believe I could do this job because of how bad sometimes people are at it.
You're sticking to that, man. Yeah, and
I am.
It's just like one of those things, like pay good football players. Don't trade for a guy who you don't think is going to sign in your building. And if you do trade for him, have that contract ready to go on the plane before he even steps down in your city. So good on Howie Roseman for knowing the situation. Good on Hassan Reddick for not willing to settle. And just all in all, Joe Douglas, you went to Howie Roseman University and you learned nothing. At least guys like Andrew Berry are figuring it out. Joe Douglas, man, this is anything but a good look for him right now.
The only thing I don't know is the verbiage of the trade was he had to reach a certain snap count with the Jets. So if he goes to, like, let's say Atlanta and he reaches that snap count, I'm not sure if that can become
if that
two
carries
still.
over, Joe Douglas should never work in the NFL again.
Yeah, I don't know if it would carry over. I don't know if it was Jets specific or if it doesn't. If it is,
you should never work in the NFL again.
Yeah, he should be fired. And there was the statement they released, like, that they're not going to make special exceptions for a player that's never played a down, and then they turn around and do that with Aaron Rodgers when he goes to smoke ayahuasca for a month in South America. Like, what are we doing? It's crazy. I don't know, man.
I don't know.
I'm
just
glad we
operate in
covered the
good
Eagles.
faith, and maybe players would be willing to play in your city. I don't know, man.
Wild. I agree. Stock down in the New York Jets and Joe Douglas. Stock up to Howie Roseman. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. 4 more shows for you this week. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Got joint practices coming up with the New England Patriots. Got a lot of content coming. Make sure your second listen, though, is the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. The drafts are coming up. Mine is next weekend. Get in on the action with Vinny Liar, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. Thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening. And let's go, Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.